I'm Aroon Shivdasani. I was born Aroon Gidwani. My parents fled partition in 1947. I was a year old. I was born in 46, and it was quite a traumatic fleeing for my parents because the family had chartered a plane and left, and that morning my younger sister was born, so my mother they left my mother, and I was a year old and my younger sister. So when my father had gone ahead to get a home for the family, there was a big zamindari family, that's why. They arrived and he said, "Where's my wife?" And they said, well, we had to leave her a bit behind because we'd have all been chopped up or something if we hadn't, if we'd waited. So he came back into Karachi to get us. Fortunately, he had some friends who told him, don't go home because Jinnah wants you to personally sign over all your lands to him and you'll be arrested. So you go to the seaport and we'll bring your wife and children. So he went and they took Mummy and my younger sister, who was just born, and myself to the seaport and got us onto a boat, and that's how we left Pakistan, which had now become Pakistan, in 1947 to come to India. All of Sindh went to Pakistan, so all the Sindhi Hindus fled. So, not knowing what to do with us, my mother put all four of us in a boarding school, the Lawrence School Sanaa, which is up in Simla Hills now. I think that was the best thing that happened to us because it was wonderful, absolutely superb. All four of us were there. It's a great school. We grew up happy, going every holiday to to my parents, obviously, as well as to my nani and to my dadi. All four of us were very, very close family. I then went to Cathedral in Bombay for my A-levels to go to Oxford. I was always very involved in sport, in drama. My major was literature, which I did in St. Xavier's College, which I went to. I used to play hockey for the college, tennis, athletics. I used to do sprinting and hurdles, etc., which, I did in school too. So sport was big in my life, and so was drama, the University Drama Society, etc., because that was something that I have always loved. So the arts, I think, are in my DNA, because during our holidays, Mummy, who used to act and sing and everything, told us that being a total human being means you have to know all about art. Not the arts in general, because through the arts you also know about humanity and about life, because life reflects arts, the arts, all of them, in one way or the other reflect life. They talk about life. And you learn humility, you learn to work with other people through the arts. My husband, Indar, went to a boarding school called Sindhya School, Gwalior, and he came down to Bombay at the same time we did, because we graduated the same year, and we met at a common wedding, in Bombay, these weddings and stuff. And it so happened that one of his cousins was marrying one of my mother's cousins or something like that. And we met. And we immediately became friends. He's, in those days, I don't know whether kids do it as much now, but we used to dance a lot. We used to have a lot of dancing parties. He's an amazing dancer and I love dancing. So every party we'd have after that, there was a lot of dancing, and I think we got closer because we became each other's best dance partners. Indar and I started going steady. And the funny part is we started going steady on the 15th of August, 1964. And so he keeps saying he lost his independence that day. I keep saying, what about mine? What about mine? But it doesn't matter. That time he used to bunk IIT once a week because, it's in Powai, a little away from Bombay, and come down to college, and I'd bunk off and go to the movies with him. And one day we were at the movies and suddenly he saw his dad there and he said, "Oh my God, that's Dad's there." He said, "Now what should we do? Should we run away?" So very boldly we went up and I said, "Hello, Mr. Shivdasani." We didn't even know whether he knew we were going steady or going out. And the funny part is he couldn't get a ticket to the movie. This was afternoon. So I got him a ticket and we went and he sat between us at the movies. So that was my first introduction to Inda's dad. But he was a really fabulous fellow. I never really got on with his mum, but his dad and I had a great relationship. And as soon as he got his results, we got married. Now, we weren't supposed to get married in 1968. We were both supposed to leave for the States to come and study. And I said, "What do you mean?" Well, his dad was so tickled pink because he was a director at Westinghouse and he had arranged for Inda to do this postgraduate traineeship. So we went first to his home to tell his mother, who was most unhappy because they had just moved home. We had to go to home to tell my mother. She said, "But I'm leaving in 2 days, 3 days." We said, "Doesn't matter, Mum, we'll do it quickly." So Inda and I went to the Taj. We organized everything. This is a stupid custom in India where they have to send things to the in-laws and everything. Well, Inda got so mad. He went to his mother. He said, "Did Anu's mum send anything?" "Yes, we put it in our cupboards and all." He made them open it up, take everything, send it back. He told his mother, "I am marrying Anu. It's got nothing to do with you. It's got nothing to do with her parents." So he went to my father. There's a Sindhi expression, "Nak kati vendo," which means my nose will be cut or whatever in the public if I don't do this, etc. He said, "I don't care. I'm marrying Anu. I don't want anything from you people. I don't want anything. I want her in the sari that she's going to wear when we get married." So anyway, we had this wedding at the Taj. We were happy as birds. We went for a night to Sun and Sands because we were leaving. We left immediately. We went to Geneva for our honeymoon, had a blast, and then went to England. We lived in Bath, a beautiful little, I'm sure you know Bath, it's so beautiful. Inda was working in Chippenham and I got a job in Bath doing something in an office. In Bath, we rented this house. The landlord was upstairs, flat. We were downstairs and the river Avon was running behind. It was so beautiful in the summer that we fell in love with it and rented it. Well, come winter, in England, there's no central heating. Not in 1968 anyway. Very pretty, as I said, in summer and winter we froze. We used to keep gozandas. If you don't know what a gozanda is, it's a chamber pot under our beds because we couldn't, going to the loo, we'd probably freeze. Then Inder got admission at Imperial College. He got a scholarship there to go. So we moved to London and he went to college. I got a job at the Observer newspaper and things were much better. There were no fridges. The well-to-do people had fridges. So we rented this apartment from a Hungarian Jew who thought we were his children. So we used to keep our eggs and everything in a little cupboard with netting on it, which all English people did, near the window so it would keep cool. One day we came home and there was a fridge, a tiny little fridge that he bought us. We thought, wow, we're in clover. And being Indian, we needed heat. Now, there was a boiler, so we used to just leave it on so that the place would be relatively warm, that we'd get hot water. We had packed all our bags, were ready to go to India. Inder had been offered a job by Westinghouse too, because he'd got a scholarship from, I think it was Westinghouse, I'm not sure, and an offer of a job for Imperial College. He finished his master's and pressure from home, only son syndrome. So we said, okay, we're going home, packed all our stuff. It was with the shippers and all our friends coming through saying, don't go to India. Why are you going back to India? Come to the States. When we reached Toronto, is where we went in Canada, we were in heaven because the apartments were heated, the cars were heated, and the hot and cold water came out of one faucet. Those days used to write letters, no phone calls, they were too expensive. We used to call, we wrote to our friends in England and said, oh, guess what? You know, the water comes out of, the hot and cold comes out of one faucet. We actually can have showers with hot water and not worry about putting money into the meters, into the hot water meters to get it. So anyway, we were there. We both worked in Canada. I worked at the university. Inder worked as an analyst, and we were very happy. We went to the theatre, I acted, we travelled a lot. At the drop of a hat, we'd hop into the car and zing down to New York, zing across to Chicago, zing across, because we had friends everywhere, you know. We went, you know, all over the place, and it was a very carefree, happy life. When we went to India, Inder applied and got into TAS, which is the elite of the Tatas, the Tata Administrative Services, and he was sent here, there and everywhere in India. And then he finally started working for the Indian hotels. He opened up the overseas for them, all the overseas things they've got in Malta, in New York, etc. Inder used to travel, and he opened it up. He'd go, and in fact the hotels in India, that the palaces that had been converted were all his work. He'd go and meet the Rajas and do this thing. And I worked, because we were very, very idealistic. We said, we're not going to, when we go back to India, Inder said, I'll work, you give of yourself to the people. So I worked with FRIA India, Front for Rapid Economic Advancement of India, and there were several of us who'd come back from various parts, from the States, etc., who worked obviously voluntarily. I worked with the Spastics and with FRIA, and we would get friends to donate vans to take the poor people to the Spastic Society. We'd get vans to go into, with medical things, to go to villages and give them medical help. And these villages, we would help them, the villagers, do barter with each other. So it was very, very satisfying. I didn't join a lot of my friends who played cards or did various things, because I was very idealistic. However, we stayed in India for 3.5 years, but I think sometimes you don't always, your wanderlust has not been satisfied. We were doing fine, we were doing very well, we were living in our own home, not with my in-laws, which we were first living with, which I wasn't thrilled about, but of course it was my husband's home. But we were on our own, and we were all very happy. I was doing my thing, Inder was doing his. But all our friends kept coming through and saying, why are you back in the regular world? See a bit more, travel a bit more. And we thought, yeah, what the hell? So I left first. Inder said, you go first. Because, you know, his mum was convinced I was the one who was always dragging him off to various places. I said, fine. I left first. I went to Toronto, because we already had all our immigration papers and all there. And Inder followed suit. Soon after, we worked there. I worked at the university. Now this was back again in Canada, and we spent 6 more years in Canada, 6 blissful years. And then Inder got a job he couldn't refuse in Washington, so we moved there. In Canada, we had just adopted our older daughter, Sasha, and she was such a fabulous bonny baby. We had wanted children for quite a while, and I wasn't able to have one. So we adopted Sasha in Toronto, and we went down to check out Washington. The funny part is that I'm going to go back a little bit on leaving Canada. When we were in Canada, we adopted Sasha the year before we left Canada, and as we adopted her in October, in December, Indar's father fell very sick, and he went back to India because his father was very sick and his father died. He came back in January, and I got pregnant with my little one, Misha. That year, he got this, he was with IBM in Canada, and we were deciding, should he stay with IBM, should he go to Washington? Anyway, the final decision was going to Washington, and that's where we went. And we settled in McLean, and I came back to Canada to have Misha that year in 1980 because, we wanted both children to have the same passports and everything. So they were both Canadian, both born in Canada, and they both were, immigrants in the US as we were. Then we moved to New York. Indar started working in New York, and I did not work at that time because my children were very little. As they got a little old enough to go to school, till 3 o'clock, I started working at a ratings company, Percy and Company, which was down in the city. And we lived in New Rochelle in Westchester. Life, even then, was very different. I know Manhattan was Gotham. It was awful. I refused to live in Manhattan at that time because it was, we came into town 3 days a week, and every time we came in, our car would get smashed or something would happen, and there were rapes and murders and everything. In the 80s, we moved to New York in 1983. In the 80s, this was Gotham. We lived in New Rochelle for 21 years. I did start the IAC at that time because as my children grew up, they grew up there, then they went to college, they came back. I used to come into the city all the time because, one needs to partake of all the richness that New York City has. So we'd come in for art gallery openings, for theater, for friends, just to walk around New York. So my girls grew up in Westchester. They went to school there. Then of course they went off to college. By the time they came back, my older daughter got married. The last thing we did in our home in Westchester in New Rochelle was marry my older daughter. She got married at a beach club close by, and she married a Jewish boy from Manhattan. And so we had a Hindu wedding. We did everything that a Jewish wedding does. We had a gorgeous wedding. And then my younger daughter said she was moving to the city. She finished college the year after. She said, I don't know why we're here. By then, Giuliani had cleaned up the city. So Indar said, why are we here? Why are we rattling around over here? Let's move to the city. I love the country because I grew up in the hills. And we always had large homes and all this. So I said, no, I want to stay here. He said, I will build you a home in the city. And he did. He got this wonderful 4,000 square foot loft on 25th and Park, which he gutted. It was a fish and tackle store, completely gutted, and made the most amazing home out of it. My younger daughter got married a few years ago, and she also married a young Jewish boy. So we had another Hindu wedding out in the open in Long Island. I did my master's while my children were growing up at Iona College in New Rochelle. I started the IAC, and that's the Indo-American Arts Council, because there was nothing. I was very involved in the arts. I told you my DNA is the arts because of my mother. But there was nothing, nowhere. Everywhere I'd go, there was no sign of Indian art. It was as though there was a desert, and it's not like we didn't have artists. Of course, we got wonderful artists, but none of them were in mainstream venues. People had heard of Ravi Shankar, as though he's great, but he's the only Indian musician we have. They'd heard, and the aficionados, film aficionados, had heard of Satyajit Ray. But, we've got amazing filmmakers. Well, I started in 1998. I started the Indo-American Arts Council to make America sit up and notice the arts of India, the visual, performing and literary arts. The other person who worked with me on this, who started it with me, is Jonathan Hollander, a dancer from Battery Dance Company, the artistic director, and a lawyer. You always need a lawyer to make a non-profit status, Talat Ansari. And we started this together, and it grew. I started in the first office I had was in the city, but then in my attic. As you know, nobody works alone. No man is an island. You need help. You need people to support you. And I have been very fortunate because I had friends in the arts. My first film I showed was Deepa Mehta's film, Earth, when I started the IAC. We did it free for people to come. Bapsi Sidhwa's book, Deepa Mehta's movie, and we had Nandita Das and Rahul Khanna come for it. So we have people who came not asking for money, not for anything. Meera Nair was at our first film festival, and she has been the face of my film festival ever since. Oh, the way we started our first film festival was we had, 9/11 happened. Giuliani asked the whole city to help revive the city, a city that was in shock. So we started the first film festival just to give back to the city. It was only 12 films over a weekend. By the time 2018 came, we had 55 films in 4 theatres. That was 1 theatre, 12 films. Anyway, we started with the godfather of Indian film, Ismail Merchant, who was a big supporter with the whole Merchant Ivory team, and closed with Meera Nair's Monsoon Wedding. People who've supported us from the beginning have been Salman Rushdie, Meera Nair, Madhur Jaffrey, Shashi Tharoor when he was here, Shashi as an author more than as head of the Under-Secretary General at the United Nations. Shabana Azmi, her father had died the night before, but she flew here. She said it's so important that this should be done. She was a big supporter too, is a big supporter. Well, I keep saying was because it was, I've now retired. We've had Gurinder Chadda, we've had Anurag Kashyap, we've had Vishal Bhardwaj, Shyam Benegal. These are all people who have given us their time, their energy. Aparna Sen, all of them actually. I'm sure I'm missing out several wonderful names of people who've given us their time, their energy, and supported us without asking us for anything in return. Even Sharmila Tagore came because we asked her to come and represent her movie. That's what the IAC did. It brought Indian talent to the fore. made Americans sit up and notice. When we started, there were no Indians on television. Indian actors were not given a chance on television, in movies, etc. At best, you would see them as a taxi driver or a newspaper vendor. Not anymore. They're all over the place. And that's fabulous. And it's not only me. I think I started a movement, but there are many other people who jumped in and did it. Wealth that we can give to the diaspora, to cultural landscape of this country. I mean, people like Shujat Khan and Amjad Ali Khan and all come and do concerts for us and do concerts for other people too. And Americans actually flood their concerts too. Hari Prasad Chaurasia came for us. Zakir Hussain lives here and does these things. All these are Indian and they do brilliantly here. My friends always seem to come through for me, and I'm sure I'm going to forget many of them, but some of them, you know, whether they give a little bit or a lot, always helped me especially when there were down times. Dinyar and Ashish Divitri, Victor and Tara Menezes, Nari Pohani, Arjun and Anjali Matrani, Jaswant Lalwani. There were others who gave me a little bit each time, Nirja, Sethi, Chandrika, Tandon, etc. But, you know, I'm sure I'm forgetting many names, but there were people who, my friends, always seemed to come through and seemed to give me money. Talat Ansari, Dilip Advani, Veena Advani, who always gave us awards for the festival from day one. And she just donated them, had them made, shipped them to us, got them to us every year. So there were so many friends who came through, and I think that besides all the sponsors who we were constantly going after, it's heartwarming to know that your friends also appreciate what you do and attended our events, and whether they were in town or not, always contributed to it. Biggest one was my husband Inder, who gave me huge amounts when we went down several times.
Our early marriage was highlighted by enormous success, whether it was in Bombay with Tatas or whatever it was. We landed up in Canada, more out of a sense of adventure. And then we had a new life. We left the Tata Administrative Service and came to Canada, and it was very exciting for us. We had a great life then. And then the highlight came when we actually adopted my first child, or our first child. It changed our life. Aroon got pregnant shortly thereafter, and we went to America. We came down to McLean, Virginia, and it was a completely different thing. You know, the romance you talk about, the sweet nothing moments, and evaporate. Why? Raising two children as a single mother practically is a full-time job. I, as the traveling working man, I'm gone Monday to Friday. So the dynamics of our relationship changed.
He's had a stroke and therefore he needs help. But otherwise he's a very independent man, able to do things.
And now we've come to this phase, and I don't know how long that's going to last, while I'm relatively mobile. And, things can change dramatically depending on my physical condition. So, we've been very fortunate. I've been very fortunate. She's done a phenomenal job at the Arts Council and a phenomenal job of looking after me. So, what can I say? She's got incredible energy. It's a lot of fun. She's the prettiest woman I've seen. She's a great social animal. She makes my life happen.
Since then, it's grown, and we had a dance festival, a music festival, a film festival, a lit fest, an art exhibition that traveled, and an amazing set of audiences who loved what we did. And America now, you know, what happens is you start something, you start a film festival, everyone else thinks if she can do it, I can do it too. And so we've got so many more dance groups, music groups, film groups, all wonderful. And artists have so many more platforms to tell their stories, to show their talent, to do what they're doing. And I feel mission accomplished. That was something I wanted to do. I wanted America to take notice. Now there's Indian arts all over America. I do think that we pioneered a movement. So last year, that was my swan song with that, and I passed it on to a Kashmiri group who's promised to continue my legacy.